Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Arthran, and here we have first episode of TopDeck. TopDeck's our new show that we're going to be doing on Magic the Gathering, bringing you stuff from new set information through to tournament information, deck building, and anything we can really squeeze in the middle. We'll start off with the new set that's coming out, Theros. Try and give you as much information as we can, go over some of the new mechanics, some of the key things about the set, and some of the stuff you should really look out for. Not going to be too in-depth, just as much information as we can in a short time. Now, Theros has 5 main mechanics you need to look out for. Some of them are new, some of them are old, but we've got 5 new mechanics to look at. First one is Heroic. Heroic's only found on creatures, and literally the way it works is really simple. Whenever you cast a spell on that creature, it gains that ability, or something happens. Simple as that. The set, Theros, very much based around Greek mythology, gods, artifacts, heroes, trials, that kind of stuff. Very much all Greek mythology. So we have heroes. Just like these two here. Both of them rare ones, admittedly, but these are the kind of things you can look at. Labyrinth Champion. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So throw a buff on it. Oh look, it then goes and shocks something. So it's a cheap little way of being able to pull extra bang for your buck out of these cards, really. Nice little mechanic to look at. Quite like it. Then, secondly, we've got Monstrosity. Monstrosity is quite an interesting one. Very good for draft play because it gives you a secondary mana sink later in the game. But it's a really interesting mechanic because Monstrosity tends to always be on the larger creatures that are quite expensive to cast on their own, like these two here, and then you have to spend even more to make them monstrous. And the way it works is quite simply, it always gives you a mana value, and then a monstrosity, and then a number. And you can only do it once. Simple as that. Like these here, like the Arbor Colossus. It's a 6/6 for 5 mana with reach, which is quite nice on its own. But then you play an extra 6 mana, it gets +3/+3 on it, permanent, because they counters. And then as soon as it becomes monstrous, something else then happens. In this case, destroy target creature with flying and opponent controls. Or we've got what is going to be such a fun card to see, 100-handed one. Giant, 4 mana for a 3/5 with vigilance, which is nice again on its own. Really nice little blocker. But you pay the 6 mana cost, gets +3/+3, and then it can block up to 99 extra creatures and has reach. So you then end up with a 6/8 with vigilance reach that can block everything. Now that's such a fun, flavourful card. It's got to be one of my favourite cards of the set, just because it's such an interesting little card. But that's the way Monstrosity works. We've then got Bestow. Now Bestow's a little interesting because Bestow works on these new enchantment creatures. So you get these enchantment creatures, you can cast the creature with its mace mana cost, and with its mace mana cost, for example, on the Leaf Crown Dryad, it's a 2/2 with reach. That's it. But the Bestow cost, you can cast it instead with its Bestow cost. So instead of paying 2 mana, you can pay 4 mana, enchant a creature with it. So instead a creature then gets enchanted with Leaf Crown Dryad, it gets +2/+2 in reach. When that creature dies, the Leaf Crown Dryad then comes into the battlefield. Really, really useful. So Bestow for me is such an interesting little mechanic here. Like Baleful Ideon. You cast it for its Bestow cost, 5 mana, kind of expensive. One of your creatures gets +1/+1 and Death Touch, but the moment that creature dies, you're then left with a 1/1 with Death Touch on the battlefield. So we're always so used to looking at enchant creatures as being kind of almost worthless spells, because the moment the creature dies, your opponent destroys 2 things. Not anymore. Bestow's quite interesting for that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is going to be done with it in this block, and what new and interesting ideas they're going to come up with this, and what interesting janky combos people can find, because this is going to be quite fun. I like Bestow. Then we've got Devotion to X. Now, Devotion to X works really simply. And I've already had a bit of discussion with some of my friends about this, and they've got a little confused, but it's quite simple. Devotion, you always have. Now, this would be easy where we're playing the Xbox version, etc. But you always have a devotion to a color, and this is the color symbols of the permanents you have in play. That's your devotion to. So if you have, for example, let's say you had a clear board, but you have 3 of the Karametra's acolytes on the board, you then have devotion to green 3, because out of all of your permanents, all you have is 3 green mana symbols on the board. That's how it works. So however coloured mana symbols there are on the board, that's your devotion. But it's interesting because they've done some quite fun things with devotion on these cards. Karametra's acolyte, for example, tap to give green mana equal to your devotion to green. Well, that's brilliant. So if I'm playing a green heavy deck, I've got devotion by turn 4, for example. You could have devotion 6, which is possible. If you've used your mana every turn, devotion 6, cast that on turn 4. By turn 5, you can have 7 mana just by tapping that creature. Or Evangel of Heliod, that when it comes into play, 6 mana for a 1/3 is kind of expensive, but it gives you a 1/1 token for every devotion to white you have. Now, that alone has 2 white mana on it. So therefore, you know that casting that, you're always going to get 2 white weenies as well. But chances are, because that's 6 mana, that's a turn 7 card, you're going to have a lot higher devotion than that. Lots of white weenies all at once. One thing I have noticed, looking at this set is a lot slower than we used to in the old Ravnica block. It's not quite as fast paced, which makes for a lot of these higher cast things to be a bit more interesting, and we're going to have a lot more fun with that. Then we have Skry. We've seen Skry before, and it is pretty much as it says there, and it is normally always Skry 2, I've noticed. But Skry, literally, it's always Skry and a number. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put any number of them on the bottom of your library, and the rest on the top in any order. And it's not just blue, it's in every single colour. Skry, it's a secondary. Let's be honest though, looking at this, for example, Magma Jet, 2 mana to do 2 damage to target creature or player. Slightly more expensive than a shock, but Skry makes it quite useful. Horizon Scholar, 6 mana for a flying 4/4, little expensive, but Skry makes it quite useful. Skry it's a useful little mechanic. You're not going to build much around it, but it's nice to have, especially in draft. You're going to enjoy having Skry to be able to make sure that you're getting what you need coming up. If you don't like the cards, top 2 cards of your library, put them on the bottom. It's a useful mechanic. Nothing to really hold your breath about, but it's going to be fun. Now, the big thing about Theros, as I say, Greek mythology. What we've got is we have 5 gods. God of each colour. Each god has special background. You can see around each of them, they've got this star-coloured background. Anything to do with them has that star-coloured background as well. Now, there's 5 gods. Each god has an artifact to go with it. It has a trial. It has 1 or 2 creatures. So there's lots of theme. And then there's a few heroes. Bit of fun. Now, I'll go through each of them in turn and their special things so you can take a proper look at them. First of all, we've got green. Nylea, god of the hunt. 4 mana, 6/6. Indestructible. Other creatures you control have trample. Pay 3 and 1 mana, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Now you may be thinking, that's ridiculous. That's so good. The reason that the god is so good is because unless you have Devotion to Green 5 or more, it's not a creature. If your devotion to green drops below 5, Nylea just becomes an enchantment instead. So all that would then do is be sitting there as an indestructible enchantment, which gives other creatures trample, and you can pay to use it to pump one of your creatures. That's quite useful. It's really useful because it's cheap, but it does mean that if anyone goes and clears your board, it then stops being a creature, which makes it slightly a liability because your opponent won't bother dealing with a god as much. They'll focus on killing off your creatures or killing off other things to make your devotion drop. And the moment your devotion drops, you lose that 6/6. So that's something to keep an eye on when playing him. But let's be honest, if you're drafting and you see one of those, you're picking it, just grabbing. Bow of Nylea, legendary enchantment artifact, 3 mana. Again, it's got 2 green in it, which brings up your devotion quite nicely. Attacking creatures you control have death touch, which is lovely. Brilliant. Very green, very much let's go. Pay 1 and 1 green, tap it. A whole bunch of different abilities you can choose from to use. You can either put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. Great. Deal 2 damage to target creature with flying. Cool. Gain 3 life. Or put up to 4 cards from your graveyard onto the bottom of your library in any order. All of them are great. Let's be honest, all of them are great. It's if you're playing green, you want it. Yes, it's a legendary. You can only have one of them. My God, you want them. They're really good. You're going to find that with all of the enchantment artifacts and all the gods, done in a very specific way to do that. Nylea's Emissary, one of the bestow creatures. 4 mana for a 3/3 with trample. Not amazing, not terrible, but bestow to give something +3/+3 and trample. Let's be honest, if you can, as I say, try and always use it for the bestow cost, because then you're guaranteed to get the creature afterwards. Great. And as I say, every single one of the gods has an ordeal, and an ordeal is an enchant aura, enchant creature, and the way they normally work, just like this: whenever it attacks, put +1/+1 counter on it. If it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, sacrifice the ordeal. Then when you sacrifice the ordeal, you have to do something. In this case, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Now the thing with this is, the wording is quite specific. If it has 3 +1/+1 counters or more on it. Now it doesn't say caused by the ordeal. So for example, if you cast the ordeal onto something, and then activate a monstrosity, and it gets +3/+3 counters, your ordeal automatically has to be sacrificed. Something to be careful of. But then again, at the same point, for that, for example, 2 mana to search for 2 basic land cards and bring them into play. So if you have a creature on your board that has 3 +1/+1 counters on it, just cast Ordeal on it, bang, you get 2 more land in play. So it allows a lot more flexibility on the way you use these cards. You don't have to use it as an enchant creature. You can use it just as a spell for just to sacrifice it straight away. Allows that flexibility to really mess around and beef up your game. So I really like the way they've done that. It synergizes really well, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to do various things. So moving on, Erebos, Black God. Again, it's indestructible. He's 4 mana for a 5/7. Again, you need your devotion to be 5 or more. His special ability is your opponents can't gain life. Not as amazing as some of the others, but again, he is 4 mana for a 5/7, so he's still a decent god. Pay 1 and 1 black, pay 2 life, draw a card. Probably a bit. You may think, ouch, why am I paying life? But then you look at his enchantment artifact, which is creatures you control have lifelink. So instantly there, you're less caring about paying life because everything's got lifelink. You don't care. Again, it's got an ability: 2 black and 2. Tap it. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's brilliant. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Activate this anytime you could play a sorcery. So you can only do it during your turn, obviously, and bring a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield to attack that turn. But it's also quite clear there that you exile it at the beginning of the next end step. The next end step. So the end of your turn, but it's very careful in the wording there. So there may be extra ways of getting around that. There may be all sorts of fun things of doing with that. But for 4 mana, and because you know that creature's also going to have lifelink, you can really mess around, grabbing stuff out of the graveyard, attacking with it, with the lifelink, with the haste, exiling it off again. Somebody will come up with some interesting combos for that. I'm not 100% sure yet. The Emissary, again with a bestow. This time it's a 3/3, which you can then discard a creature card. It gets +2/+2. Or, again, if it's an aura, you can discard a creature card to give the enchanted creature +2/+2. So, just like with the rest of these, try and always use it for the bestow, discarding stuff to pump that creature, to throw it in, and then when it dies, or when it leaves the play, bestow, just turn it into a creature again, and suddenly you've got this lovely 3/3. The Ordeal, again, as all of the Ordeals are, when it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it hits 3, do something. This one, when you sacrifice it, target player discards 2 cards. I feel that the black god is not quite as synergized as the green one so far. The green one, everything seems to fit quite nicely together. Here, they're a little more higgledy-piggledy, but there are still quite some nice effects there. Moving on, Heliod, the white god. 4 mana this turn for indestructible. All other creatures have vigilance, and pay 2 and 2 to put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token into the battlefield. The thing you're going to notice, looking at from what I've seen so far, effectively, white is White Weenie. White Weenie is back, and there are lots of weenies, lots of ways to get tokens for white. It's very much a White Weenie is how this set is rolling out. It is enchantment creature, and obviously you'll notice that the gods are legendary enchantment creatures. The artifacts are legendary enchantment artifacts. The emissaries are enchantment creatures. There's everything pretty much is an enchantment. Anything relating to a god is an enchantment, which does very much mean that there's going to be a lot of anti-enchantment stuff floating around. Be prepared for that, obviously. But yeah, that's going to be the removal of choice. Is going to be anti-enchantment stuff. The artifact this time, creatures you control get +1/+1. Useful. Let's be honest, when you're playing a weenie deck, +1/+1 makes all the difference. And then the ability of it, tap, destroy target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. Not quite as powerful as some of the others, but very useful, especially you soak a little bit of damage, then you nuke it. So it is quite fun. The Emissary, Heliod's Emissary, high bestow cost on this one. High. Way it works though is whenever it or the thing it's enchanting attacks, tap a creature your opponent controls, and it's +3/+3. So it is a very useful creature, but it has a very high bestow cost. So it's more, I don't know if we're going to see much of that. Probably less so than some of the other emissaries. The Ordeal here, though, is probably one of the best Ordeals of the lot, especially for a white deck. 10 life is ridiculous. 10 life is a big chunk. Again, it's 3/+1/+1 counters, but 10 life really does make you wonder what to do with it, and how you're going to want 4 of these in any draft and just throw them around, because if you have a few of these out, you are absolutely laughing. And also, it is very much going to make your opponent, if you put one of these down, it's going to make your opponent focus on that creature. Very much focus on that creature. So helps you control the battlefield a little better. Onwards to blue and Thassa. The cheapest of the gods at only 3 mana, but you still need 5 devotion. So whilst it may be cheap to cast, you still need that 5 devotion to get anywhere. Beginning of your upkeep, skry 1. I'm not the biggest a fan of skry. I like the idea, but I prefer something a little bit more powerful, a little bit more useful. Yes, it controls your deck a little better, and yes, for blue, cool, but it's not quite the way I like to play personally. Pay 1 and 1 blue, not tap it. Target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. You don't have to tap that though, so you can pay that as many times as you like. That's very useful. So, but the wonderful thing is that doesn't need it to Thassa to be a creature to work. So again, even in a draft, you're going to want this as early as possible. You're going to want to throw that out on turn 3, turn 4. You're unblockable. Get in there, do some damage. The artifact, whenever a creature you control deals damage, you may draw a card. You don't have to, so you're not forced to mill yourself. But again, with the deck control, creatures your opponent can control attack this turn if able. Now that's useful, but it means you're going to have combat tricks to really mess around with it. But it really does, again, it's blue, it's for control, it's to make sure that you've got control of the battlefield to do what you want it to do. Thassa's Emissary, the, again, relatively expensive bestow cost for a 3/3, but whenever it deals damage or the enchanted creature deals damage, you draw a card. Again, that seems to be the kind of direction this is going, very much with the draw cards as much as you can, get the things you want. The Ordeal, sacrifice the Ordeal for drawing 2 cards. After just seeing gain 10 life, drawing 2 cards doesn't quite feel as balanced, but that's definitely the way that blue is going in this set. And then we have porphyros. I'm hoping that's correct. Porphyros sounds about right. 4 mana for a 6/5 on the god. Great. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Porphyros deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, 1, you either you're going to be playing a red deck, but that also, it's under your control, but you're going to be playing a red deck with lots of creatures, sorry. Or, you're going to be wanting to play a red-white deck with lots of white weanings everywhere. You know, red-white, we've seen it before many times with Boros. We know the way it's meant to be thought, and when we look back at the Return to Ravnica set, there are quite a lot of Boros things to put in token creatures. So combine the two, and Porphyros is brutal. 3 mana, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. That's not a creature, that's all of them for 3 mana that can be cast as many times as you like. That's lovely. That's brilliant. Again, I'm personally thinking very much of building a red-white deck for weenie aggro. It's going to be very powerful. The Hammer, creatures you control have haste. That's red through and through. 3 mana, sacrifice a land, put a 3/3 golem into play. It's an enchantment artifact creature, so again, removal is going to be good against it. But if you've got Porphyros out at the same time, you sack a land to get a 3/3 and to do 2 damage to your opponent. Oh, and it has haste. So, you know, that combo there, lots of fun. The Emissary, again, a very high bestow cost, 7 mana bestow cost. But the ability cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, which is very useful. And it's a +3/3 again. So the ability is quite nice on that Emissary. I like the ability. It is a little high on the mana cost, but as I say, Theros does feel like it's a slower set, so you're more likely to get into the turn 7, 8, 9, 10 plus. Ravnica was a lot faster block, so you died a lot quicker. Even in 14 was relatively fast, but it looks like Theros is slowing things down a bit, so we're going to get a lot more of these long plays. Be a bit more interesting. The Ordeal, when you sacrifice the Ordeal, does 3 damage to target creature or player. Again, compared to gain 10 life, it does feel personally a little weak. Everything does compared to gain 10 life for 2 mana. But it's going to be fun to throw that with something a little, some of the weenies that have got haste. You know, turn 1, get something out. Turn 2, Ordeal. Turn 3, Hammer. And you're just rolling. So that's going to be quite good. Right, moving on. There are 3 planeswalkers in this set. Now, I'm actually going to start this page backwards. The whole set revolves, and the story revolves around Elspeth. She's the champion, this is her story. But we've got 2 other planeswalkers here. I'll start with Xenagos the Reveler, which 4 mana, red green, is very much a Gruul champion. Yeah, planes +1 ability, give you as much mana as you want. Pretty much, if you're playing red green, you're going to have lots of creatures. You're going to have at least a few creatures. For a +1 ability, it's great. +2 ability, +0 ability, sorry, gives you a 2/2 red and green satyr. There are a few different satyrs in the set. Again, with the Greek mythology, satyrs are quite common. But for a 0 ability, it's nice because you've always got that backup there to be able to say, oh crap, I've been wiped out. Give me a creature. Give me a free creature. It's good. Or the -6, again, as I say, if you're playing a red-green deck, you're going to be very creature heavy. -6, exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may put any number of creature or land cards among them onto the battlefield. Now, that's crazy good. I'm actually very tempted to get a couple of these and throw them into my Sliver deck from M14. Because my Sliver deck, in the entire of the deck, has 4 spells. The rest are creatures or land. The moment I pop that -6 ability, whatever I take off the top 7 of my cards, they're going on the battlefield. You build the deck around that kind of idea. Now, there are a lot of enchantments in this set, I did say, but you build it around that idea, this Planeswalker pays for himself. Lots of fun. It's going to be interesting to see what people can build around that one. Next, we've got Ashiok Nightwear Weaver. Now, blue-black, the kind of idea we always get with the blue-black decks, very much Dimir kind of idea behind it. The +2, exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. It's milling but worse, because we're not even putting in the graveyard, we're making them get rid of it. And it's a +2, which is pretty nice, let's be honest, because you need it. Because you can go -X, put a creature card with a converted mana cost X, exiled by Ashiok, onto the battlefield under your control. That creature is a nightmare in addition to other creature types. So you're milling the cards off the top of your opponent's library, you're then casting them as your own creatures. It's useful and all, I like the idea of it, and +2 is helpful, but it very much depends on your opponent. It's going to be really interesting to see what your opponent's doing. And against certain decks, if you're playing against a creature light deck, it's not useful, but it's less useful. The -10 on this one, exile all cards from all opponents' hands and graveyards. Now that's very fun, because you just kind of say, your hand, get rid of it. And again, it then feeds into the -X ability, because anything that was in their hand or their graveyard is now in your pool of possible things to cast. The problem is, to get there, you're looking at like 4 turns to be able to do -10. You're then having to do 1 or 2 turns before you can then do any -X to bring anything into play. So it is very much built around a slow deck, and it has to be a control deck to make this work. It's a bit of a gimmick. It'll be interesting to see what people can actually build around this. If people can build any interesting combos, but I'm not sure on that one personally. Then we're going to move on to Elspeth. She's an expensive planeswalker at 6 mana, but She's an absolute powerhouse. You see her in any draft, you're going to want to grab her. Very nice card. +1 ability, put 3 1/1 soldiers onto the battlefield. 3 for a +1 ability. Again, as I say, I'm very tempted to build a red-white deck. Throw that in with a red god. Bring that in. Oh look, 6 damage to my opponent. Very nice little combo, but it's +1. -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. You can see that white is very much designed around a white weenie. It's the idea of, oh look, you've got something big and stonky. Not anymore, you don't. Let's get rid of it. Bang, done. Really easy. Just go. Nice little ability. The -7 it gives you an emblem. Creatures you control have +2/+2 and flying. Again, as I say, by the fact that she's a 6-mana planeswalker, and then she has a -7 ability, you're talking about, because it's a white deck, minimum of turn 8 before you can do that. 8, 9 really does show that the set is a lot slower, a lot more fun in that respect. But it very much shows the kind of idea behind the white weenie. Because if your opponent destroys none of your tokens, even if you're willing to sacrifice Elspeth, you're going to have 9 1/1 tokens by the time you then get that emblem, make them all 3/3s with flying. If you're not willing to sacrifice Elspeth, you're looking at having 12. It's mad, but awesome. And I'm really interested to see how this works. I want to get my hands on one of these. I want to build that red-white deck now. And that's it. I'm wrapping that up there. There's much more interesting cards there, and I really want to just put out and say everyone should go take a look. mythicspoiler.com. This is where I got all the card art from. They're also always one of the first places to look at to get cards as they're leaked. They always put them together. You can see every single set on there with all the cards. Before you go to the pre-releases, before you go to any drafts, take a look at mythicspoiler.com. Take a good look through the set. Get a good idea of what you're doing. We've given you some basic information, given you a bit of an idea about the set, but we've not gone into too much detail this time. So hopefully we've given you enough to intrigue yourself. But I would say go take a look, find out what you want, and get stuck in. We will be back with the next set, if we're not back before, depending on what happens. And I hope that you enjoyed this. Give me some feedback. Let me know if you like this format, if you want anything changed. Give us some feedback and let us know what you think. And we'll be back soon. Thanks very much.